Hey everybody, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement, bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training. And we're going to be talking about transitions, points at which our athletes are going from one situation to another situation before, during, sometimes after their session. And there are a number of different athlete profiles that we need to consider and what the transition means for that particular athlete, whether we're talking about coming into the session for the first time, whether this is something that is on repeat in terms of behavior and the situation, and also going from break time back to exercise time as well. So a transition is any period in which an athlete is going from one situation to another. Typically in our sessions, we're going from what is considered low demand, meaning that no real expectations or tasks are being placed upon that individual. They're not being asked to do anything. There isn't any specific challenge that's being applied to them right now. Now, there's a difference, of course, between internal and external states, because our athletes can be anxious at times when they're walking into a session. So that's something that we want to consider. It may not be the exercise that they are doing right now because they're not doing exercise just yet, but the anxiety is stemming from the fact that there is something that they are going to be doing in the near future. And that is often what is going to create that anxious situation for the individual, and they may be perseverating on it as well. In fact, oftentimes what we know about worry and anxiety is the worry and anxiety is actually worse than doing the thing. And this happens in the neurotypical population as well with respect to exercise a lot of the time. So this is not something that is completely alien to the neurotypical population. It just so happens that it's oftentimes more acute, and we need more navigation strategies. We need more workability for our ASD and neurodivergent athletes as well. And before we get even more into depth with this, please definitely subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a premiere of Tuesday training or any of the other Autism Fitness videos that I put up, and share this with someone for whom it might make a difference, whether they're a professional or a parent. But back on to transition. So let's talk about a couple different athlete profiles. We have athletes who have no or very little difficulty transitioning into the fitness session, into the adapted PE session, into the situation in which fitness is going to happen, and that environment as well. We have to take into consideration that even if an athlete doesn't outwardly display any type of anxiety or caution, we still want to make the environment and make ourselves as amenable to their enjoyment, being able to participate fully and meaningfully, and give them a sense of control in the session. So this is not just in case of emergency, break glass and pull out a contingency, because that's not going to be functional and it's not going to apply to every single athlete. And it's not just athletes who have a more challenging behavioral profile or are less motivated to engage in fitness activities, because this is also not a linear process as far as motivation. It's typically not all or nothing. So we're going to break this down athlete profile-wise here. We have an athlete who never has any difficulty transitioning. They come into the session, they're ready to go. My glasses are slipping off. There we go, quick fix. And they are able to transition between different exercises. If they need a break, then they take a break, fine, everything's good. Then we have athletes who have a little longer latency between entering into the session and then starting their exercises. For example, I had an athlete today who ran into the gym and then ran around the gym, and then once we went over to the visual schedule of which exercises, he went to the first exercise and then he had a couple runs up and down the turf. This might be something that is familiar to you, not necessarily in a gym situation, but any type of learning or skill development environment. So he needed to not just, we could call it getting out some energy, but that's not really what it is. The athlete in this case may have been a little overwhelmed from a sensory perspective, and when transitioning from outside into the gym, he needs a little bit more time, and he needs some more opportunity to self-regulate as well. And that's something that we can build in. So what we don't want to do, as soon as the athlete comes in, when we see that they need a lot of self-regulation, we don't want to say, okay, just stay here and stay quiet and stay still, and okay, well, first let's go. We don't want to overwhelm the athlete any more than they already are. We want to provide calm, comfortable, and consistent support for that athlete, and provide not only a sense of calm, but also a sense of confidence as well. So they're transitioning in, they're walking back and forth, even running back and forth. We want to make sure first, of course, that it's a safe environment. But if that athlete needs to self-regulate in that particular way before he comes over to the visual schedule and then gets his exercises started, then that's fine. It's absolutely fine, because it's not really taking away from the session right now. And it enables the athlete to get what they need to get from that stimulus perspective, right? So that's the beginning of the session. We have athletes who transition into the session really well. We have athletes who need a lot of input when they come into this session. So rather than starting off with something slow, and this, by the way, is one of the reasons that I changed my programming model to take away some of the slower paced warm-up exercises that we used to do. And now we just go medicine ball throw, or a sled push, or a sled drag, or a sandbell slam, something that has a lot of oomph to it, something that is going to increase the activity very quickly, because that athlete just needs to get out some of that anxiety. They need to, not burn off energy, but that athlete needs something that is very intense very quickly, so that they can focus on that particular exercise. That's not going to happen with something slower. That's another one of the reasons, among several others, you can watch my video on warm-ups and cool-downs, why we don't do a lengthy stretching and mobility component in the beginning of our workout. We go right into our power exercises. And for a lot of athletes, when they are coming into the session and they are notably dysregulated, going right to the sled and pushing it back and forth for a couple rounds can be an absolute, no pun intended, game changer for them. We also have athletes who have difficulty transitioning from a break, so a period of higher activity or higher challenge when they're doing one of their power or strength exercises. So they're doing a push-up or an overhead press or a squat, and then they have a break for 30 seconds or a minute, and I promised I was going to talk about breaks. I have not forgotten that. And then they come back to the next exercise. So one of the things about breaks, or two things about breaks actually, is breaks can be taken for two different reasons. Number one, physiologically, because the athlete is getting fatigued from that exercise, because it's at a specific level of stimulus or challenge, where the athlete is going to have some momentary breakdown in performance, which is great. That's kind of what we're after. If an athlete is doing 8 or 10 or 12 challenging repetitions, then their performance might break down at rep 13 or 14, so we have them complete the set, because it's at an intensity level that matches their current capability. This is a good thing, by the way. This is exactly where we want to be with our athlete. After that, the body needs some time to recover so that they can go to their second and third and fourth and maybe even fifth set. Now, physiologically, this is absolutely a necessity. We don't want our athlete taking too short a break, otherwise they're not going to be able to repeat that performance again. So as we would with any other situation, the other thing to take into account is sometimes our athlete needs a break from a self-regulatory or an adaptive perspective, because not only the physical demand of the exercise, but also the challenge of having to focus, having to concentrate, oftentimes because the break is such a an intensively strong reinforcer, the athlete wants to stay in break mode and has difficulty recalibrating and coming back into the exercise, because that's going to be another period of challenge. So we want to keep breaks around 30 seconds to a minute, maybe a minute and a half if we're really talking about intense strength or power training. Because after that minute and a half mark, for the athletes who are recovering physiologically, about 90 seconds is all they really need most of the time in the programming that we're talking about. And then I have found in programs with my own athletes over the past 23 and a half, 24 years, whatever it is now, that if we go past 90 seconds, it is going to be more difficult for the athlete to self-regulate and come back to the next exercise. So it's going to be more difficult having them transition back to exercise after 90 seconds than it might be after 30 or 45 seconds. And most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time when you have an athlete who has such difficulty transitioning, they're probably not at a point with the exercise where they are performing that strength movement to such an intense degree that they really need a minute and a half of physical recovery time. They might need that minute for adaptive or self-regulatory recovery, but not really from a physical perspective, right? Unless there is some outlier situation in which you're determining, using your best judgment, otherwise, right? So the Goldilocks zone of breaks between exercises is somewhere between 30 seconds to about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Now, what happens, here's another profile consideration, if you have an athlete who you know is at least initially going to have some difficulty transitioning, and you know that they are going to take extra time and that you're going to need to incorporate a number of different contingencies, like, okay, first this exercise and then you can take a break, and then going back to the visual schedule, okay, you can take a break and then you can, sit on the squishy ball, which is a reinforcer. So in these situations, it makes a lot of sense from a programming perspective to have the athlete do a superset of exercises, A1 and A2, versus straight sets. So straight sets are when an athlete does a set of squats and then they rest and then they come back and do another set of squats. However, we want to fill in as much time as possible with exercise so that we can deliver a training effect, so that we can have the outcome that we want to have for the athlete. So supersets are a great opportunity when you have an athlete who has a longer transition time between break and coming back to the exercise. What I mean by supersets, of course, is you have an athlete do a pair of unrelated exercises. So I like antagonistic supersets the best for my athletes, meaning you have a pushing exercise and then you have a pulling exercise, or you have an upper body exercise and then you have a lower body exercise. So you start out with a set of squats and then the athlete does a set of standing band rows, and then they can take a break. So you're getting double the amount of exercises, which may not seem like a lot for 5-minute period, and then the athlete is taking this extended break. But think about that from the perspective of a 35 to 45 to 55 minute session. You are literally doubling the total amount of exercises that we get done. So even if this athlete, at least for this time, is taking a longer break, and is then taking a break can double up pretty quickly. What I mean by that is if you have an athlete who is starting off with a 1-minute break, but then it takes them another minute after that minute to transition back to the exercise, then that's officially 2 minutes, right? Which is a long break. So in order to counteract some of that, we may have the athlete do 2 exercises instead of 1 exercise, so that we're getting double the amount of good exercise in that session. So over time, what I've also found, and I mentioned earlier that this is not a linear process. Athletes will have good sessions, they'll have better sessions, and then they'll have some sessions where some of those skills and some of that, some of those capabilities or their patience for the session that day is a little bit off. And so we're always going to be in the mode of what is going to work best for this athlete in this particular session. After 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 sessions, you start to really get a sense of that athlete. And I cannot tell you how many PAC profile assessments, by the way, the PAC profile the standard operating system for our Autism Fitness Certification and our Autism Fitness practices. But I can't tell you how many times I've run a PAC profile assessment session with an athlete, and then they show up for the second and then third session, and we've made what could be construed as monumental progress, whereas they were taking, 3-minute breaks in the first session. Now they're taking 30-second breaks in the second or third session. But this is all part of the strategy. And we have to keep in mind that the skill development is going to occur if we create the right environment and use the right type of empathetic coaching with each one of our athletes. So in terms of breaks, in terms of setting up the situation, in terms of an environment that's conducive to the success of the athlete from all three areas of ability, physical, adaptive, and cognitive, we need to keep in mind that sometimes there are going to be these transitioning hiccups, we could say, but all of these behaviors are demonstrating to us something that is going on for that athlete, whether it's internal and they're getting dysregulated, whether they are less than motivated right now to participate. So that's something where we need to take action and say, all right, does this athlete need a more concrete contingency here? So they may not remember in the moment that, oh, after I do these 10 push throws, then I can take another break. So sometimes the athlete needs a reminder halfway through. This is a great opportunity to use behavior-specific praise as well. Awesome push throw, you've got 3 left, and then you can take a break. So all of these things can be built in to help scaffold that transition time for the athlete so that it doesn't become something that you are wary of or something that you are anticipating nervously. Then everybody in the situation is anxious, and that's good for nobody. So think about the athletes that you're working with or your future athletes, if this is something that you are intentional about taking on, and those periods of time that may not be very clear for the athlete, and those big transition periods, either transitioning into the session, transitions between breaks and then exercise, and the third would be transitions to exercise that are particularly challenging for or particularly not highly reinforcing for the athlete. I'll say that. But when we use strategies like behavior-specific praise, using contingencies, and also talking it out with the athlete, also letting them know what's going on. So, hey, you've got farmer's walks next. I know that's challenging. Last time you got up to this, so we want to use behavioral momentum in that as well. So we are taking the trauma out of transitions, and we are building in things that really work for our athletes regardless of their profile. We want to be considerate of the fact that it may be a big change for them going in from the car into the building, into the gym, and now we're potentially ramping up that anxiety. So we want to meet that anxiety with consistency, with caring, and with confidence. I had so many different words going around in the gumball machine that is my head right there that I completely bumbled the first one. Oh well. Anyway, hope this has been helpful for you. If it has, or if you have athletes who have challenges with transitioning from exercise or any skill back to that skill development, leave those in the comments below. I love answering these questions. I'm here to help. And if you are ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro anywhere in the world, then you can go to autismfitness.com. You can download the course syllabus, and then you can register, start your coursework immediately, and then meet me or one of our master level pros for your full day, hands-on, feet-on, brains-on training that you and your athletes deserve. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. Thank you for watching.